You, Mumm-ra-san.
This is another marvelous video. I'm Grayson Ottaway. Thundercats is a renowned 80s cartoon with a phenomenal roster of memorable characters, so much so that even their auxiliary characters who have nothing to do with the Thundarian lineage and bloodline have fleshed out stories and personalities. And one such character who gets the spotlight for today's video is Hachiman. Hachiman is an ancient Japanese samurai who was summoned by Mumm-ra to do his bidding, in this case to defeat Lion-O. But as an honorable man with a sentient sword that refuses to fight good, Hachiman and Lion-O soon found themselves joining hands and forming a very strong alliance. Before we go into our explanation, a very small request: if you like our content, please support us by subscribing to this channel. Small click for you, but for us means a great deal. Thank you. Hachiman's origin in the original Thundercats animated series. As you may already know, Hachiman is a samurai. What you may not know is the fact that he comes from the planet of the Red Sun, which is not very far from New Thundera and has atmospheric conditions similar to that of Third Earth. As a character molded after Japanese culture and into Japanese lineage, his house back on his home planet resembles a traditional Japanese-style abode. Samurais have a strong sense of honor and a strict code of conduct known as Bushido, and Hachiman upholds that every single time. He made his first appearance in the 1985 Thundercats animated series, as well as on Third Earth itself in the 27th episode of the show known as the Thunder Cutter. Mumm-ra had been having a hard time defeating the Thundercats, primarily due to Lion-O's tremendous might and skill with the Sword of Omens. The mutants consistently failing to defeat the cats did not help either. Naturally, the demon priest needed someone who was renowned for his prowess with his own sword, and what better way to find someone like that than going after a samurai? From his cauldron inside the Black Pyramid, Mumm-ra summoned the ancient samurai warrior known as Hachiman, who possessed a mighty sword of his own known as the Thunder Cutter. As a samurai who followed the Bushido to the T, Hachiman was not the type of warrior to side with evil. To alleviate this problem, Mumm-ra convinced Hachiman that the Thundercats were the evil ones, while Lion-O was the worst of them all with his Sword of Omens. With this knowledge, Hachiman decided to defeat the Lord of the Thundercats once and for all. He also wished to show his might as the best wielder of a sword. Meanwhile, the warrior maiden Nada was at the cat's lair. She was on her way to go back home with Lion-O, but the route from the cat's lair to the Treetop Kingdom was a 3-day journey. To cut it short, Nada suggested a shortcut, where her and Lion-O would have to cross a ditch known as the 4-day drop. The land on the sides of the ditch were connected by a very thin bridge, walking on which would cause the traveller to be awfully well balanced. Meanwhile, it got its ominous name from the fact that falling into the ditch would result in anyone taking 4 days to hit the ground. Lion-O began to cross the bridge carefully, but to his surprise, someone else came towards him from the other side. This man was Hachiman, who was unaware of the man in front of him being Lion-O. Lion-O found it strange that Hachiman would even try to cross the bridge while he was crossing it, because it clearly could not withstand the weight of 2 people. However, the 2 stubborn swordsmen locked horns and started to cut at the log with their swords in order to get the other person to back off. Ultimately, the log broke, and they were saved by Nada, who shot an arrow with a rope attached to it. Hachiman now saved alongside Lion-O, thanks to Nada, and was very grateful towards them. He soon asked them about the Lord of the Thundercats, only to learn that he was right in front of him. Since he had formed an unlikely friendship with Lion-O already, he didn't wish to fight him. However, he could not go against his code and his word. At the same time, the mutants overlooked the altercation from their jet. Lion-O had no choice but to accept Hachiman's proposal duel. However, neither of their swords unsheathed to fight one another, since both Lion-O and Hachiman were honorable men. Fighting the other would cause their respective swords to fight something that was not evil and as such, Hachiman finally realized that he had been tricked by Mumm-ra. So he befriended Lion-O and decided to help him defeat Mumm-ra. He even cut down a tree to create a new bridge for crossing the ditch. As the three of them tried to cross the 4-day drop, they were attacked by Monkian and Slythe, who were piloting the Skycutter. Nada uses the head of a tree and her rope to catapult the Skycutter far away, causing the jet to crash. Ultimately, Slythe was taken to the Treetop Kingdom as a hostage. Monkian took the news of the event back to Mumm-ra, who realized that he needed to find someone without honor to do his bidding. Once again, he summoned a skilled fighter from his cauldron, but this time it was a ninja. The ninja was tasked with doing Hachiman's job, and thus he left for the Treetop Kingdom. He disguised himself as Gumlar, the Tabbit, to negotiate Slythe's release, but his act was caught by Hachiman. The ninja took Nada as his hostage, and with his stealth, it was very hard to notice him in the dark night. And yet Hachiman did not give up and wished to save Nada while taking down the ninja. Ultimately, the other Thundercats were summoned as well, and the ninja disappeared into thin air while Nada was saved by Lion-O's Sword of Omens. With the cats coming in, the mutants present fled as well, and Hachiman found new allies in the Thundercats and in Nada. Hachiman played an important role in helping Lion-O out in the first story arc of the show's second season. The arc began with Lion-O waking up from a terrible nightmare where he had to leave Thundera, leaving some of his fellow Thunderians behind. In the dream, he met Jaeger, who told him how some of his new friends were on Third Earth itself, and they had managed to survive the planet Thundera's destruction. With this knowledge, Lion-O got Chitara to find out more about them. You may already know of the Thunderians Bengali, Pumira, and Linkso. While Chitara succeeded in locating them, so did Mumm-ra. As such, he sent the Berserkers to capture them and bring them to the Sorcerer. Later, the ship of the Berserkers was raided by Lion-O, who tried to save the Thunderians. However, his failure resulted in him being taken to Fire Rock Mountain. The problem lied in the fact that the Fire Rock, or Thundranium, weakened Thunderians, putting all of them in jeopardy. Lion-O himself was trapped in the mountain, and he even lost his sword in an avalanche. While Panthro fought against others on his way, the mutants arrived to take control over the Thunderian prisoners, who tried their best to escape from the situation. To make things harder, if not impossible, for the Thundercats, Mumm-ra summoned Hachiman once again, but this time he was enchanted with a spell and made to believe that Lion-O was the reason behind the suffering of his great-uncle's spirit. So when the two friends reunited with one another, the one Lion-O truly met was a bewitched Hachiman. This put Lion-O in a tough situation where he had no option but to fight Hachiman. Fortunately, Hachiman overcome the spell, and with his conscience back on track once again, he sided with Lion-O to work together and free the Thunderians who were captured. As they reconciled, they almost succeeded in rescuing the Thunderians.
A weapon as powerful as the mighty sword of Odin.
Hachiman loses his sword. Hachiman appeared in Hachimans Honor, which is the 17th episode of the show's second season. Here, the leader of the evil Lunatics, Luna, tricked Hachiman into believing that she was a damsel in distress who needed to be saved by him. She cried for help, which was overheard by Hachiman, who was on his way to the Tower of Omens, that too during a terrible storm. The samurai immediately rushed to her aid, but she lured him into a nearby cave. In the cave, Hachiman met Alura, who hypnotized him soon after. He was then frozen to the bone by Chilla. His sword, the Thundercutter, was soon taken away and handed to an automaton samurai created by the Lunatics. With Hachiman being captured and his sword taken away, the samurai fell stripped of his honor and respect. As Hachiman was unable to reach the Tower of Omens on time, the Thundercats assumed that he had gotten caught up in the storm. Soon, Lion-O, Snarf, and the wily kittens set out to look for the samurai. Hachiman was found and he had to be thrown out, after which he went after the Lunatics with his allies, but they soon had to pass through the Valley of Chains, where they ended up getting tied up by sentient chains. They were then attacked by Luna's automaton, who was armed with the Thundercutter. As the thing had no conscience to differentiate between good and evil, the Thundercutter could not sense whether Lion-O and Hachiman were good people or not, making it even more lethal than it normally was. Despite the robot being a tough opponent for both Hachiman and Lion-O, the tide of the battle changed when Hachiman touched the sword, allowing the Thundercutter to recognize Hachiman as its true master. Soon the sword destroyed the automaton which was holding him. Finally, Hachiman leads the Lunatics into a cave and buries them under snow.
You know me, bad man. I am
The double-headed Dragon of Doom. We got a better glimpse into Hachiman's life in the episode known as The Jade Dragon, where Hachiman learned of the impending doom that awaited the Thundercats. Due to Mumm-ra's continuous failure against the Thundercats, the ancient spirits of evil were agitated. They commanded Mumm-ra to try out another extreme scheme, this time interfering in the process by suggesting the double-headed Dragon of Doom to Mumm-ra. This Dragon of Doom was a tiny statue that had been bewitched by the disapproving father-in-law-to-be of an ancient samurai. The statue had grown in size and devoured the samurai before turning small once again, bringing that samurai's life story to an end. Turns out the samurai had been rescued by a young Jaeger, and the dragon statue was kept in the casket that housed the treasure of Thundera. Since the Sword of Omens was also from the casket, it breaking out of it caused the dragon statue to get scattered all over New Thundera. At the same time, the ancient spirits of evil convinced Mumm-ra to release the dragon. Meanwhile, Hachiman had gotten a nightmare where Lion-O was being eaten by the double-headed Dragon of Doom while he was at home. The nightmare felt more real and possible than his regular dreams. He soon hopped onto his mechanical horse known as the Dojikaje and set off to help his friend. While on his way, Hachiman and Dojikaje were attacked by Mumm-ra and his pet dog Marmot, who had been transformed into a giant bat. Later, a robotic dog named Scooper was able to help Chitara and Lion-O uncover the double-headed Dragon of Doom's statue. However, Mumm-ra soon activated the statue, allowing it to grow in size. It gulped down Lion-O and Chitara at once. Hachiman arrived at the site of the action and rushed to Mumm-ra in order to alleviate the problem at hand from its root. He then summoned help from his ancestors' spirits and returned back to the Black Pyramid to fight Mumm-ra. As the both of them fought, Hachiman emerged victorious before returning to New Thundera. Ultimately, Lion-O saved himself from the problem.
the spirit of my ancestors, the ancient master.
The Fight for Honor. Thundercats: Hammerhand's Revenge is one of the several comic series that is set in the Thundercats verse. However, due to the continuous inconsistencies persistent across the comics, they aren't considered to be canon. The story begins with the Berserkers, who were previously defeated by the Thundercats. However, they were back once again as the annexed Hachiman and his crew's ship. They soon captured the man and held him for ransom to ask his father for money. One of the men and the leader of the crew was Hammerhand himself, who wished for revenge against the cats. Soon the Thundercats learned of Hachiman being captured and tried to rush to his aid while being unaware of all the obstacles that stood in their way. At first, Lion-O was captured by many gigantic griffins and he was taken to a new place altogether. Meanwhile, his friends tried to cross a forest, which turned out to be a place no one was ever able to leave. As such, every other Thundercat was inconvenienced and in a very perilous situation. Ultimately, they were able to save themselves in the Eternal Forest and formed an unlikely alliance with its guardian, who had been causing these issues because they did not wish for Third Earth to fall victim to technology in general. The Thundercats, being Thunderians and not a native species from Third Earth, didn't help either. Back at the lair of the Griffins, Lion-O met Princess Altera, who was able to see visions of Lion-O's life. She wanted to test his intentions as she considered the technology that he had brought to Third Earth to be a bad thing. However, Lion-O was able to prove his authenticity and ultimately got her help in the journey to help the Berserkers and save Hachiman. Meanwhile, the other Thundercats had reached the Berserkers and both sides were in the midst of a fantastic battle. Chitara stood out in particular, but when things began to look bleak, Lion-O, Princess Altera, and the Griffins arrived to the rescue. At the same, Hachiman, who was at the ship, learned that Hammerhand had captured him for this very reason, talisman to lure the Thundercats in, after which he would get the Sword of Omens. The Thundercats soon arrived at the ship of the Berserkers with the army of the Griffins. However, the ship's armaments took down several Griffins, while Hachiman broke free to fight Hammerhand and save Lion-O. Ultimately, Princess Altera made a great sacrifice to win the battle and entered a state of prolonged sleep. What makes Hachiman such a powerful samurai? Hachiman made his entry in the 1985 show with a bang, as he asserted his prowess to above Lion-O's. In fact, in that very episode, Lion-O had claimed that if he were to fight the samurai, he would lose due to Hachiman's high skill and experience. This alone gives us an idea of how ridiculously strong Hachiman truly is. To put things into perspective, scaling his powers objectively is the best way to go. Let's start with his ultimate weapon, the Thunder Cutter. What the Sword of Omens is to Lion-O, the Thunder Cutter is to Hachiman. This powerful and ancient katana is so sharp that it can slice through solid stone with ease. It also possesses sentience, and as such can judge the virtue of its opponents. If the person is of a good heart, the Thunder Cutter does not work against them. However, it's lethal to those who harbor evil within them. To add an extra advantage, the Thunder Cutter also works as a compass. When it comes to Hachiman's personal abilities, he is a wise, skilled, and physically fit swordsman of the highest caliber. Marvelous verdict. Hachiman is an inspirational character due to his strong sense of morality. For children following the show, he is one of the best side characters to look up to. If Honor had a poster child, Hachiman would fit the bill, and to have someone like him as an ally makes the Thundercats all the more strong. And with that, we come to an end. What do you think of Hachiman? Did you like this video? If yes, then please don't forget to like, and do please comment on the video. We love your comments. Till next time, please be safe.